Once the ummah comes together under Al-Hasan radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Muawiyah initially appointed Abdullah afterwards. So it's not like Muawiyah wanted to kill Abdullah after that. But Muawiyah actually appointed him as a governor of Kufa. He became a governor of Kufa in Iraq, but he still used to condemn as-Safin. And then under Al-Hasan, Muawiyah, once things came together, Abdullah still stayed together. He still stayed with them. He still did what he was supposed to do. But he went into seclusion. All he would do at that point is just worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he didn't want anything to do. So he didn't go out in battles. He didn't go out. He abandoned the battlefield. He abandoned all of these discussions, public gatherings. And that's the thing. He used to just worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all alone. Now there is one thing that was left. Abdullah ibn Amr al-As was very, very close to Al-Husayn radiallahu anhu. And Al-Husayn was upset. He was disappointed with Abdullah ibn Amr for being out there on the Battle of Siffin. When Al-Husayn saw him on that day, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he saw Abdullah ibn Amr on that side of the army, he never forgave Abdullah ibn Amr. And that really broke Abdullah ibn Amr's heart. And this is to show you the human side of the Sahaba. Really, it's the human side of the Sahaba. Al-Husayn radiallahu anhu would walk into a gathering and he'd say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Everyone would respond at the same time, Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Abdullah ibn Amr would wait till everyone else responded and he'd go, Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Like to try to get his attention, I still love you, I'm still trying to reach out to you. But Al-Husayn was hurt that, Abdullah ibn Amr did not fight on the side of Ali on that day. And so subhanAllah, Abdullah ibn Amr, whenever Al-Husayn radiallahu anhu would walk away, Abdullah ibn Amr, he would cry and he would say that, shall I not tell you of a man who's most beloved to Allah amongst us, and most beloved to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam amongst us, and most beloved to the angels amongst us. It's that man there. It's Al-Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And nothing would mean more to me in this world than him forgiving me. He doesn't want to talk to me. And it broke his heart that he didn't want to talk to him. And subhanAllah, you have a very emotional conversation, which is that Abdullah ibn Amr, he eventually asked for the intercession of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Abu Sa'id, he took Abdullah ibn Amr to the house of Al-Husayn. And Al-Husayn, when he saw Abdullah ibn Amr, he didn't say anything. Sakat, he was quiet. And Abdullah ibn Amr, he started to speak to him, and Al-Husayn kind of ignored him, and Al-Husayn said to him, how could you fight against my father? You see, subhanAllah, this was deep for him. This was emotional. Like, how could you, as close as you were to me and as close as you were to the family, how could you fight against my father? And Abdullah ibn Amr, he said to him, Wallahi, I would not have done so had Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam not taken my hand and said to me, Ati' abak, follow your father ma dumta hayy, as long as you're alive. Said the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prevented me. Said otherwise I would not have been on that side. Right? And Al-Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu forgave him. فَقَبَّلَ رَأْسَهُ, he kissed his forehead. Abdullah ibn Amr kissed his forehead, and subhanAllah, that relationship was that bond was brought back. And this just shows you the human side of the Sahaba. Look, they had their fights, they had their conflicts, they had their disagreements, they had their arguments, they got emotional over these things. But what's amazing is that when the call of Salah would be made, they'd still all pray together. Even as they were fighting and trying to figure out who's on the truth and who's not, and who has the haqq and who doesn't, they would still all pray together. But this was a mass fitna that struck the companions. And what you see is at the end of his life now, we'll just kind of go to the end of his life. Amr ibn al-As radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when Amr ibn al-As was dying, he divided his life into 3 phases. This is the father of Abdullah. Because again, they were like brothers. They grew up together. I mean, really, they weren't too far off. So Amr ibn al-As, as he was dying, he said, I can divide my life into 3 phases. He says, there was the phase that I was an enemy to the Prophet ﷺ, and if I was to die in that phase, then I definitely would have been a person of hellfire. There was no way that I was going to go to Jannah if I would have died in that phase. Then he said, there's the phase that I became Muslim and I was with the Prophet ﷺ. And he said, if I would have died at that time, I would be sure that I would be a person of Jannah. He said, but now after the Prophet ﷺ is dead, I'm not sure anymore. I'm not sure about myself. And Abdullah, he said to him, he said, Ya Aba Abdullah, ma hadha al-jaza'u? He said, what is this fear? Oh my father, what is this fear? وَقَدْ كَانَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ يُدْنِيكَ وَيَسْتَعْمِلُكَ. The Prophet ﷺ used to bring you close. And he used to give you tasks. And this is true. Rasulullah ﷺ loved Amr al-As. And the Prophet ﷺ, he treated everyone so well that everyone thought they were the most beloved person to Rasulullah ﷺ. So Amr al-As, he asked the Prophet ﷺ one time, because he saw how well the Prophet ﷺ was treating him. He says, Man ahabbu nasi ilayk? Who's the most beloved person to you? Rasulullah ﷺ said, Aisha. You really want to know, it's Aisha. And then he said, No, min al-rijal, from the men. He said, Abuha, her dad, her father. But that's how well the Prophet ﷺ treated his companions, that Amr thought that it was him. Then Amr, he said, then who? He said, then Omar. He said, I stopped asking the Prophet ﷺ out of fear that he'd never say my name. I was like, okay, this didn't work out as I thought it would work out. But the point is, Rasulullah ﷺ, he used to treat the Sahaba that way, including Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu. And Amr ibn al-As, again, achieved some great things in life. And the Prophet ﷺ used him for great things in life. He was mistaken in his role in the fitna, but he came back after that and everything was all good. Right? So whenever Abdullah tells his father, he says, look, Rasulullah ﷺ used to bring you close. He used to use you for really important things. He says, Ay bunay, qad kana dhalik. He said, yes, O my son, it is as you said. He says, وَسَأُخْبِرُكَ عَنْ ذَلِكَ. But let me tell you about that. He says, إِنِّي وَاللَّهِ مَا أَدْرِي أَحُبًّا ذَلِكَ كَانَ أَمْ تَأَلُّفًا يَتَأَلُّفُنِي ولكني أشد حبا. He says that, look, I don't know if the Prophet ﷺ used to bring me close to him and used to give me those tasks out of his love for me, or مؤلفة القلوب, like the Prophet ﷺ, which is to bring the hearts together, join the hearts. The Prophet ﷺ, when the leaders would come from different tribes, Rasulullah ﷺ would give them tasks, he'd bring them close, he'd put them in positions and things of that sort to not make them feel hurt. Just like when Al-Abbas, we mentioned this in the story of Abdullah ibn Abbas, when he came forth and he said, can you give Abu Sufyan something? Rasulullah ﷺ said, whoever enters the house of Abu Sufyan, kana amina, he's safe. So he says, I don't know if the Prophet ﷺ really loved me that much, or this was just mu'allafat al-qulub. This was just the Prophet ﷺ treating me well because of my position. He says, وَلَكِنِّي أَشَدُّ ولكني أشهد على رجلين أنه قد فارق الدنيا وهو يحبهما. He said, but there are two men that I can bear witness that the Prophet ﷺ loved when he departed from this world. Ibn Sumayya, being Ammar ibn Yasir radiallahu ta'ala anhu, وابن أم عبد. Who is وابن أم عبد? Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. He says, those are two people that I know the Prophet ﷺ loved when he passed away. Like I could tell by the way the Prophet ﷺ treated them that it was true hub, it was true love. He said, as for me, I really don't know if it was really love from the Prophet ﷺ or not. Then Abdullah, he's with his father and he comforted him. And he was crying. He was remembering the Prophet ﷺ. He was remembering his life. And he raised his hands and he said, Allahumma amartana fatarakna. Oh Allah, you gave us some commands and we fell short of those commands. Amartana fatarakna. There were some things that you commanded us to do and we fell short. Wa nahaytana farakibna. And there were some things that you prohibited us from doing, but we ended up doing it. So there's some things that you told us to do and we fell short, and there were some things that you forbade us from doing and we ended up doing it. وَلَا يَسَعْنَا إِلَّا مَغْفِرَتُكَ. There is nothing that would encompass us except for your forgiveness. Astaghfirullah. I seek your forgiveness. وَمَاتَ عَلَى الْإِسْتِغْفَارِ. So Amr ibn al-As, he left this world actually seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a sign of a good ending. This is husn al-khitam. To leave with any form of dhikr is a sign of a good ending. He left this world seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking Allah azza wa jal for that forgiveness. And it's in Sahih Muslim, Amr ibn al-As, he told Abdullah, he said, when you bury me, he said, stand next to my grave for the amount of time that it would take to slaughter a camel and distribute it, which in the Arabic language means a moderate amount of time. Like don't just leave. Usually after a janazah you put the body in the grave and then you leave. He said, stand next to my grave for the amount of time it would take to slaughter a camel and distribute its meat. He said, so that I can feel your nearness. So he loves his son. He said, so I can feel your nearness. And when the angels come to me that are sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm more confident in my reply. So that's the amount of love that he has and the respect that he has for his son. Right? Like I feel like if you stay there and you don't leave right away, then somehow I would have more confidence. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, that you hear the footsteps of the last people that leave your janazah. Subhanallah. That whenever you're put in the grave, you actually hear the footsteps of the people leaving your janazah. So he tells his son to stay and wait. Don't leave right away. Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, after that, after that passing away, now because he goes into his hiding, because he kind of just leaves the whole scene, there is so much difference of opinion as to where Abdullah ibn Amr passed away. Okay, so historically speaking, we don't really know. We know that after, basically when Yazid ibn Muawiyah took over, when Muawiyah appointed his son Yazid, Abdullah ibn Amr did not give him bay'ah, and he kind of just stayed in Al-Madinah, and he used to have a small masjid or something like a musalla, something that he'd pray in and he'd read Quran, something next to his house, and he used to sit there and he used to read Quran, and he would cry, and people would come to him and ask him questions, but for the most part he completely abandoned the scene. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that he was killed in the massacre of Al-Harra. Al-Harra was when Yazid actually sent an army upon Medina that the Prophet ﷺ prophesied. Rasulullah ﷺ mentioned a massacre in Medina that would take place. And so this battle came from this group came from Asham, from Syria. And it's according to Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, that's when he died. He actually was one of the people, one of the companions that died in those moments. As for his legacy, his students include Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Urwa ibn Zubayr, Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, Tawus al-Kaysan, Masruq ibn al-Ajda', and Ata ibn Rabah radiallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in. So obviously some of the major companions were his students, and so his fiqh is not to the same effect as the others, but really his legacy is in hadith and is in his asceticism, in his zuhd. Okay, so his legacy is not found as much in fiqh as the other abadila are, but in hadith there's definitely an effect. And in tafsir you come across some of his opinions, but obviously not to the same level that you do with Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be pleased with him and to be pleased with all of the companions, to forgive all of us for our shortcomings. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to gather us with them, with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Jannat al-Firdaus. Allahumma ameen.